So I wanted to speak a little bit more about the container, which is the energetic field in which you do work on yourself, usually with a facilitator holding space for you. So the container has boundaries, and if you do not respect those boundaries, the container starts to collapse and you can't do as good work in the container. And if you have a very strong container, you can consider the container to be perfect, in which whatever happens in that container is meant to happen and is something that you can use to do the work on. So for example, if you sign up for like a 5 series with a craniosacral practitioner, then let's say you see this person once a week for 5 weeks. That is your container. And while technically the work happens on the table when you're receiving the craniosacral energy work, everything that happens in your life in between those sessions is part of the container. And what you're going to notice is that things are heightened. You're going to notice that things start happening. It's almost as if your reality starts to become like hyper, and the things that always happened before but didn't bother you, now they're going to start to bother you. And that's all because you've committed to the container and you're telling the universe, I'm ready to work on this now. So for example, if you're taking a boundaries class, and it lasts like, let's say it lasts 3 weeks. So in those 3 weeks, things are going to happen in your real life where your boundaries are going to be challenged and you'll probably feel highly uncomfortable. If you're uncomfortable, you know you're doing the work. It's very important that you do something different than before. So with this discomfort that comes up, it's important that you have a different reaction than you used to have. Then you're doing the work. If you don't do anything different than before, then you're kind of like wasting an opportunity and not really doing the work. And the container is serving you, but you're not taking advantage of it. So in a container, there is something called the field. And if you're doing group work, especially, let's say you're doing a 1-month teacher training in Bali or something like that. So this is going to be like an insular community where all the fellow students are going to become your friends and family. You're going to eat a lot of your meals with them. You're going to spend a lot of your time in between classes with them. This is the field. Things are going to happen in the field. People are going to trigger you. You're going to get upset with people. You're going to become really good friends with certain people and have like digesting kinds of conversations where you digest what happened earlier in the day, etc. All of this is part of the container. So class time isn't just what is a part of the container. All of the in-between times, like every single thing that happens, every time you go to the store, every time you eat a meal, every time you have an interaction with anyone, that's part of the container. And again, the more strongly held the container, the more these like in-between times you can use or you can see will start to serve you. So in many ways, you cannot take anything personally when you're in a container. You just can't, because it's part of the material. It's like the universe is making weird stuff happen so that you can learn. So what do you do if you have a faulty container? In my opinion, if you have a messed up container and you may not be able to fulfill the intention you had in going into that container. And the facilitator may be narcissistic and their intention is purportedly one thing, but they end up stealing from the container. So especially if you are learning from an organization that has a very charismatic leader, oftentimes that leader is entitized and they are kind of stealing energy from all the students, even if they're teaching something that kind of works on paper. So you might get the book knowledge, but what you're going to see is the teacher's ego. And you're probably going to learn how not to hold space. You're probably going to learn what not to do, as opposed to kind of getting a transmission of wisdom from that leader. Does this make sense to you? So the longer and deeper the container, the more things happen in the field. The shorter and therefore kind of like more flimsy, you could say the container, less things will happen in the field. So let's say you have 5 craniosacral sessions in a row, but you didn't commit to a 5 series. You only signed up for one, you liked it, you signed up for the next one, and then you kind of make a decision after each one, you know? In the end, you still might end up paying for 5 sessions, and you still might have 5 sessions in a row with the same facilitator, but you didn't commit to a container that's as long and as deep as a 5 series, so you will not get as much out of those 5 sessions. To me, a container is sacred. And again, like I said, it's perfect. And you're telling the universe, if you're ready for a 5 series, that you want a deep container. If you tell the universe you just want one craniosacral session and that's it, and then after that, when you decide you want a new one, that might be where you're at. That's okay. But if you're actually ready for a 5 series and you're refusing, then one of the things you're unconsciously doing is trying to control your healing process through your ego. And the ego will often hijack your healing process and slow it down so that you don't have a deep experience and you don't have catharsis and you don't feel uncomfortable actually. And you might see these craniosacral sessions that you only sign up for one by one by one. You might see them as your like me time or your spa time or your like relax and rejuvenation time. You probably will not feel uncomfortable. And you probably, some aspect of you, obviously prefers that. But often if you're doing the work, you're going to feel highly uncomfortable. And that's your opportunity to make a shift. So I wanted to say that about the container. That I personally think is perfect. Everything that happens in the container is meant to happen, even if it's in between like session times or in between class times. There is something called the field. Especially if you're doing group work, the field will be the other students, but the field can also include teaching assistants and the facilitator themselves. So if you're doing these craniosacral sessions, for example, whether you sign up for them one by one or you do a 5 series, your practitioner will probably somewhat act as someone in the field. So if something happens between you and the practitioner, don't take it personally. Remember, if you're uncomfortable, that means you can shift on whatever this discomfort comes from. And it's really important that you do something different than before. So you might have to like confront the practitioner about something. And that might be different than what you do in your day-to-day life up until that point, and that's probably why it came up in the field. Otherwise, it'll come up, let's say right before your session with someone else, a work colleague or something like that. You coming to the session like open and like about to cry, then the practitioner will know what to do with you, and you'll probably have a way deeper session than otherwise. Does this make sense? Okay, so I think that is enough. All right. Thanks for listening. See you next time. Bye.